The Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. In 1781, a 57-year-old philosophy professor in Königsberg, Prussia, published a book so dense that even his closest friends couldn't get through it. Kant himself admitted the writing was dry, and yet this book, The Critique of Pure Reason, would go on to become one of the most consequential works in the history of philosophy, one that nearly every major thinker after him would have to reckon with, directly or indirectly. This is not a light read, but underneath the difficult language is a genuinely radical idea, one that changed how philosophy understands the relationship between the human mind and reality itself. Let's break it down, piece by piece. Section 1. The question that started it all. Kant frames the entire book around one guiding question. How is synthetic a priori knowledge possible? That sounds intimidating, so let's unpack it. Synthetic knowledge tells you something new. It adds information. Contrast that with analytic knowledge, which is just true by definition. All bachelors are unmarried doesn't teach you anything about the world. It's true just by unpacking the word bachelor. A priori means knowledge that doesn't come from experience. You don't need to go out and test it. Kant's puzzle. How can something be both genuinely informative, yet knowable, without experience? His go-to example is mathematics. 7 plus 5 equals 12 isn't just a definition. It tells you something real. Yet you don't need to count objects in the world to know it's true. Kant believed this same kind of certainty might be achievable, or might not be achievable, for the biggest questions in philosophy: the existence of God, the nature of the soul, the limits of the universe. Figuring out where that certainty ends is really what the entire book is about. Section 2. The Transcendental Aesthetic. How experience begins. Kant starts by examining sensibility, the most basic level at which the world reaches our minds at all. His claim here is striking. Space and time are not properties of the external world. They don't exist out there, independent of any observer. Instead, they are built-in forms, frameworks the human mind imposes on raw sensory data before we can experience anything at all. Here's an analogy that helps. Imagine a pair of glasses fused permanently to your face since birth. You've never experienced the world without them, and you never will. Everything you've ever seen has already been shaped by those lenses. Kant argues space and time work the same way. They're not something we see through. They're built into the very act of seeing. This single claim does enormous work in the rest of the book. It sets up the foundational distinction between phenomena, the world as it appears to us, shaped by our mental structures noumena, the world as it exists independently, in itself, which we can never directly access. Section 3. The Transcendental Analytic. What the mind adds. If the aesthetic explains how raw sensations get organized in space and time, the analytic explains how the mind turns that raw material into coherent, meaningful experience. Kant argues the mind possesses a set of built-in concepts. He calls them categories that get applied automatically to incoming sensory data. There are 12 of them, grouped into 4 families: quantity, quality, relation, and modality. Concepts like causality, substance, unity, and necessity fall into this group. Here's the key move, and it's a big one. These categories are not learned from experience. They're what make organized experience possible in the first place. Without the concept of causality already built into how you think, you wouldn't perceive one event as causing another. You'd just register disconnected flashes of sensation, with no structure holding them together. Kant then explains, in a section on what he calls schemata, how these abstract categories get connected to actual concrete experience. And within this section, he also takes a swing at philosophical skeptics, most notably Descartes, arguing that your inner sense of yourself, existing continuously through time, actually depends on there being a real, persistent outer world. You can't have one without the other. This became known as Kant's refutation of idealism. Section 4. The Transcendental Dialectic. Reason overreaches. This is where the book turns from construction to demolition, and it's arguably the most famous section. Kant sets his sights on the three great subjects of traditional metaphysics: the soul, the universe as a totality, and God. On the soul, Kant examines classic arguments claiming the soul is a simple, indestructible, immortal substance. He argues these all rely on a subtle mistake, confusing the fact that I think accompanies all of your experience with the claim that this I is therefore a provable, independently existing thing. He calls these flawed arguments paralogisms. On the universe, this section contains what may be the book's most striking demonstration: the antinomies of pure reason. Kant lays out 4 pairs of arguments. In each pair, one side, the thesis, argues one conclusion. The other side, the antithesis, argues the opposite. And crucially, both sides are argued with rigorous, seemingly valid logic. Does the universe have a beginning in time and a boundary in space? Or is it infinite? Is matter infinitely divisible, or built from indivisible simple parts? Does genuine free will exist alongside natural causality, or is everything strictly determined? Does a necessary being, something like God, exist as the ground of the world, or not? Kant's point isn't to crown a winner in any of these debates. It's to demonstrate that when reason tries to make totalizing claims about the universe as a whole, it inevitably generates equally convincing arguments on both sides. For Kant, this is proof that reason has wandered past the boundary of what it can actually settle. On God, Kant then dismantles the 3 classical proofs of God's existence: the ontological argument, which claims existence follows logically from the very definition of a perfect being; the cosmological argument, which claims there must be a first cause behind everything; and the design argument, which infers a designer from the apparent order in nature. Kant argues all 3 ultimately lean on the ontological argument at some point, and that argument fails, in his view, because existence isn't a property you can simply define into a concept. Saying something is defined as existing doesn't make it real. Section 5. What's left? The doctrine of method. After all this demolition, a reasonable question is, does anything survive? Kant's answer in the book's final section is yes, but with clear boundaries. Mathematical and scientific knowledge remain fully intact because they operate entirely within the world of possible experience, where Kant's whole framework says the mind is on solid ground. Metaphysical questions, God, the soul, ultimate freedom, can't be settled by pure theoretical reason. But Kant leaves the door open. He hints that while we can't prove these things through logic and experience, there may be a different kind of justification, rooted in practical, moral reasoning, rather than theoretical proof. This sets up his next major work, The Critique of Practical Reason, where he argues that morality itself gives us grounds to believe in freedom, even if we can never prove it scientifically. Closing. Step back, and the whole book reads almost like a courtroom case in 3 acts. First, Kant establishes the rules of evidence: space and time as mental forms, not external facts. Second, he establishes what the mind can legitimately know within those rules: the world of experience, organized by the categories. And third, he puts reason itself on trial, showing exactly where it breaks down when it tries to answer questions that exceed all possible experience. The result isn't a book that destroys human knowledge. It's a book that maps its boundaries, with a level of precision that more than 2 centuries later, philosophers are still arguing about.